Well, hello. This is Pastor Matthew Woods from Grace Lutheran Church in New Albany, Indiana, and this is the weekly devotion for May 17, 2021. Today's title, The Power of Context. Something I like to do when it comes to getting gas is save up my Kroger points so that I can get the best discount that I've earned for those points. 50 cents off at least or higher. $1, of course, is better. When I get enough points, I usually go to the gas station, fill up my car, and I take all my gas cans with me, and I fill those up too, so that I can go and fill up my wife's car later on. You know, $1 off a 3-gallon gas is still $35 we save, right? If you get $1 off your on your points, $35. That's a good savings. Last week, I had enough points and I went and got gas. Not to mention that my points are about to run out. They always have sort of a clock running on them. So maybe the timing wasn't great, but if you'll remember last week, gas was a bit of a problem for the eastern part of our country. And, well, let's just say a gas line wasn't as protected as, well, that's all beyond me. But while I was filling my gas cans, I got a lot of looks. The lady on the other side of the pump, she peeked around, saw me pull my cans out of the car, and she peeked around. Finally, she wondered if things were getting bad enough that I had to start saving up the gas to get extra gas. She assumed I was hoarding because of the situation. In reality, I told her what I was really doing. I was just trying to get the most out of my points. So she smiled, she shrugged, and she went on. Meanwhile, the guy behind me driving the tanker truck that was filling up the gas station on the other side of me was watching what I was doing as well. He saw me unloading my gas cans and pumping gas into them and putting them in my trunk. And he finally couldn't stand it. He made a comment about how unsafe and illegal I was acting by putting these in my trunk as a closed space. Well, he may be right, but he's also the first tanker guy that ever gave a rip about my gas. So, all I did was what I always do, folks, is I when it comes time to cash in my Kroger points, I take my cans in and I fill it up with gas, get my 35 gallons that way, right? But because of the context of what was going on in our country, I was viewed as some kind of hoarder rather than someone trying to be frugal. Now, that's the power of context, and that's what we're talking about today. Something similar is going on in Daniel chapter 6. Daniel has been appointed as one of 3 main leaders that were helping to oversee the governors of the Persian nation under Darius, who was the king then. Daniel 6:1 through 5 tells us that Daniel distinguished himself above all others in his ability and in his skills. Now remember, Daniel lived in a time, his whole life was a changing of context. He, like other Israelite young men, were hauled off to Babylon when Babylon conquered Israel, conscripted into service to the king of Babylon, and given a name that invoked a Babylonian god, Bel, right? He was forced to learn the language, forced to learn the culture, dressed like a Babylonian, and adapted to many other things. His life was all a change of context. But he did not compromise his faith, not even when the Persians conquered the Babylonians. Again, another change for Daniel. So in Daniel 6, verses 6 through 9, other leaders of the Persian nation, in their jealousy, these governors and other leaders, they recommended to the king that the king make a decree. It's a good idea, king, that you make a decree that for 30 days no one is allowed to pray to anyone except you, king. Oh, well, listen to how Daniel reacts. Do you think he cringed? Do you think he hid himself in fear? Not at all. Verses 10 and following says, Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows were open towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and he prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. I love that phrase, just as he'd done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. They were waiting for him. So they went to the king and spoke to him about the royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown to the lion's den? How nice that they remember that. Daniel didn't let the new law dictate or compromise his prayer life, you notice. Didn't change him at all. He did not try to hide anything, but opened his windows toward Jerusalem and did what Daniel always did. And his enemies they knew his pattern, and they were waiting for him. They were watching, taking notes. He kneeled down and he prayed, giving thanks to God just as he'd done before. I love that phrase, just as he'd done before. He stayed consistent. Daniel knew the law, and most likely knew why the law was made, who was behind it, what the motivation was. He knew who he worked with. Probably could have at least guessed that this wasn't the king's idea, right? He probably understood who made it, who was behind it, all that was going on. He understood. But what's worth noting is that it didn't change him. His energy and his attention still went to the Lord, to being faithful. The context of things changed, but Daniel didn't. And that was the pattern of his life, if you notice, all the way through. He was always a godly man, no matter what happened. Now, isn't this a lesson worth noting? God's people get to stay God's people, even when the context of their lives change. Contexts change all the time. Doesn't change who we are in Jesus. We remain in Jesus. The dynamics of an economy can change overnight, right? The dynamics of governments like Babylon can change overnight. The dynamics of a family can change overnight. Daniel was ready because his prayer habits were consistent. He exercised his character. It was all ingrained into him. The Lord was so ingrained into Daniel's life that such changes in context didn't alter or faze him one bit, nor would it change his way of doing things or the way God would have him do things. Context is always going to change, my friends, and often that change will have an effect. It'll do something. It'll be painful, maybe. We may not end up in the lion's den, but we could end up facing some difficulty. Daniel did that. I mean, he faced those things. He understood. But this law that they made, it made him a criminal overnight by doing the things he just does every day, right? He just carried on. Overnight, he became a criminal because of his faithfulness. The law made people look at Daniel differently. And Daniel knew the consequences, but chose to remain consistent in his prayer life anyway, and in his way of praying. It wasn't how people were looking at him. It's how God looked at him. If anything, the attempt to ruin Daniel actually fortified Daniel's faith, and it'll do that for us as well. In fact, the final verses tell us that the events of the lion's den led to another decree by the king, and in every language, to praise God. Being consistent in our faith, not always easy, but it's necessary, regardless of what may come. And in context, and as our context changes, people will look at us differently, perhaps. But it is always how the Lord looks at us, too. Just like he looked at Daniel, that matters most. You notice, by the way, we remember Daniel. We call him by name. But the guys that try to trap him and run him down, they are forgotten parts of history. You see, all that matters is how God looks at us and what he's done for us in Jesus. The Lord has called us into faith to follow Jesus. The disciples proved that wasn't always easy. I mean, his disciples went through a lot, but it was always powerful. It was always important as those around them were able to witness and hear and hear their testimony rather, and to see what they could do to get that message. Look at the impact of Daniel that he had on Darius, right? To be consistent is good for our families to see. It is good for our neighbors to see. It is good for us to have a steadfastness in the Lord. It makes us stronger the more we practice and engage what is important to the Lord. And, the Lord will remember his own. So I would suggest keep praying. Keep believing in Jesus. Keep reading your scriptures. Keep doing what Christians do. Love your neighbor, no matter how hard it is, because the one who's in you is greater than the one who's in the world. The power of context has nothing on the power of Jesus and the love of Christ. And so the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with his favor and forever and always give you his peace. Just a couple of announcements as we round things out. Vacation Bible School. Yes, it's upon us. Work days will begin a week from this Wednesday. We'll start having work nights and getting people together and painting and getting the gym ready. It'll be that time again. But I want to encourage you and urge you to go to the website, get registered, get connected, volunteer. We're going to need your help. The only way this happens is with the whole congregation. And so we ask for that. Sign up today online, Grace at glcna.org. And there's a volunteer section as well as a student section. And remember, we're going to have to cap it at 150 students this year. So please keep that in mind. If you want a t-shirt, you want to order that online, you pay for it through PushPay, and that will be taken care of that way. So we're doing all this pre-stuff online this year because of the way things are structured. On another front, we are also going to be looking ahead towards things this fall. We're in the midst of talks of bringing back things like Wednesday night, Grace on Wednesdays, as well as Sunday school and Bible class in the fall when school starts up again. So pray for those things that we might be able to outline a good program and a way of doing that would work and again help us to be consistent as our context changes. And so I pray the Lord be with you. And again, thanks for joining us today. I'm Pastor Woods, and God bless your week. Thanks for being with me. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.